welcome back to the Kind Mind series. If you're tuning in for the first time, do make sure you check out our introductory video and also the first episode, which was on how to cope in quarantine and isolation. This week, we're very excited to be exploring how to be more mindful and specifically the positive impact that mindfulness can have on our well-being. And believe me, there are so many amazing things mindfulness can do for your well-being, which I found out by talking to Layla. Layla is one of our student counsellors. She's very experienced, very knowledgeable, and very passionate about mindfulness, so it felt only right to bring her on this week's video. We talked about unhelpful thinking patterns, the common misconceptions of mindfulness, and also the very simple, basic ways people can be more mindful in their busy day-to-day lives. So lots of good stuff in this video. Continue watching to hear more. Layla, welcome to the Kind Mind series. It's lovely to have you. How are you?
Thanks, Jess. I'm really well. It's lovely to be here.
Good. So we're going to talk about mindfulness. Mindfulness is something that I hadn't heard of until a few years ago, and I really feel like it's quite quickly become a bit of a buzzword, and I therefore think this video will be really great to help clarify what mindfulness actually is, and how it can be helpful to our students.
Sure. So mindfulness is a meditation practice which helps you to be present in this moment without judgment. So I thought I'd share a quote from Jon Kabat-Zinn, who's one of the first people to bring mindfulness from the East to the West and begin studying its impact on emotional and physical health at Massachusetts General Hospital. So he says, "The present is the only time that any of us have to be alive, to know anything, to perceive, to learn, to change, to heal. Mindfulness is the awareness that emerges through paying attention on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmentally to the unfolding of experience moment by moment." I think the best way to understand mindfulness is to experience it through practicing. So by practicing a few minutes a day, you're developing the part of your mind which observes your thoughts, and you can then make a conscious choice about where to focus your attention. And I think this is particularly helpful for students' mental health, as it can help them manage stress, anxiety, and low mood. It's really a proactive way of looking after your mental health. It can improve your concentration, memory, and sleep. And when you're in the present moment, you're much more effective at whatever it is you're doing: studying, relaxing, sleeping. Whereas if you're focusing on the future, for example, you may be creating stories which make you anxious. What if I don't get a first? What if I don't get a job? We can do the same with the past. If only I'd got into Oxbridge. Or if only my girlfriend hadn't broken up with me. The present moment is the only time we can engage, create, and choose. And when we're more connected to ourselves, we're more mindful of our choices. And we can then really respond and make conscious choices rather than react.
It makes a lot of sense. I just picked up on what you said, that the most effective place to focus your attention is on the present. Such a simple way to put it. Before we talk about how to do this, I think it would be really great just to know more about what the proven benefits are of mindfulness.
Yes, so there has been quite a lot of research recently on mindfulness, and some of the research studies have highlighted the impact of mindfulness practice on mental health, indicating improved clarity about one's internal experience, the ability to regulate difficult emotions, and individuals' well-being viewed as independent from their circumstances. Quality of life, depression, anxiety, and coping styles were improved as a result of mindfulness practice. Other studies highlight that the cultivation of mindfulness skills lead to insight, non-reactivity, and acceptance of one's experience. Worrying and rumination decreased. Engagement with unhelpful thinking patterns, often associated with depression, decreased. Another model found that emotional, cognitive, and behavioral flexibility increased and created positive outcomes. And generally, that people who practice mindfulness regularly have an increased sense of perspective and resilience. And if you're interested in the research, I would mention that Professor Mark Williams created the Oxford Mindfulness Centre at Oxford University, and they are really at the forefront of doing research into mindfulness and teaching it as well. So we'll include a link to his website, or to the Oxford Mindfulness Centre website, so you can have a look at that.
Yeah, definitely. We'll definitely put that on our website. So go and check that out if you're interested in a bit more of the proven research around the benefits of mindfulness. Just so many things you mentioned there, so it'd be really good to unpack some of that further. Specifically, you mentioned noticing thoughts and feelings, and I just wonder why it is important or helpful for us to notice those unhelpful thinking patterns, and how can mindfulness be used for this?
Okay, so let me give you some examples. So many students at Imperial have low self-esteem, and their strategy may be to keep away from these feelings of not being good enough, to constantly achieve. So as long as I'm achieving, I'm keeping away from these bad feelings. And this may work for some time. However, we can't always be at the top. So this sense of self-esteem is conditional on achievement, and doesn't work, when we fail, for example, or things don't go the way we want them to go.
Yeah.
And it's also often sustained by demanding, critical, and sometimes punitive internal voices, which can create huge anxiety and stress. Some stress can be motivating, but if we're overwhelmed with stress, we can end up procrastinating and disengaging. So adjusting one's expectations of oneself and creating a compassionate and empathic voice to balance out the harsh internal voices can be a way of beginning to develop an unconditional sense of self-esteem that comes from inside. And as you begin to replace the unhelpful judgments and criticisms you have of yourself with acceptance and compassion, you may begin to feel less pressure, and that achievement can then become a choice rather than something you have to do to keep away from the bad feelings. Similarly, many students tend to cope with difficult feelings like anger and sadness by pushing them away. However, this can cause anxiety and depression, as the feelings don't go away but become stronger as they're avoided. So through mindfulness practice, you may find that as you begin to allow the feelings that are present, you get a sense that they come and go and are important sources of information. For example, you may be angry that your relationship with your PhD supervisor doesn't feel supportive. You could avoid this feeling and end up feeling demotivated and low. Or through engaging with this feeling, you might recognize that this dynamic needs addressing. You could then take some action and create a different outcome.
Yeah.
I also just wanted to mention grief, as this is something that I think many of us may soon be confronted with if we are not already, and something that those working on the front line of this epidemic will be encountering every day.
Yeah.
So in my experience, people who are grieving can really benefit from setting aside some time each day to check in with themselves and how they're feeling, to allow the feelings they're having, and to have empathy and compassion for themselves while they're feeling them. Because grief is a process that needs to be allowed.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's really helpful to have these common examples, and to have these examples of things that people are probably currently feeling. And it sounds like these possible sort of negative or unhelpful thinking patterns are usually quite automatic and habitual, and maybe that's where mindfulness comes in, because it allows people to just stop and pause and break those cycles, which results in them being kinder to themselves. So despite all of these proven benefits that we've sort of touched on, I would imagine that there are still students out there who feel quite wary about the word mindfulness, and Perhaps there are some misconceptions, quite common misconceptions about what it takes to practice being mindful. So, for example, some might think it's quite complicated, or it sounds quite complicated. Perhaps there are students who worry, oh, it will take a lot of time, or maybe they worry that they won't be good at it. So what would you say to these kind of thoughts or perceptions of mindfulness?
So the practice is really about accepting whatever happens for you when you practice.
Yeah.
So sometimes students will say, I've tried practicing, but thoughts kept coming. That's fine, and will happen. Each time a thought arises, there's the opportunity to note it and then return to your breath. And the more you practice this, the easier it becomes. It's like a muscle that you're exercising, and it becomes stronger the more you practice it. So we're not trying to get anywhere. We're practicing being present to witness our experience as it is in this moment. In terms of time, often students say, I don't have time to practice. And my experience is that it creates time for you, because you're actually much more effective and efficient at what you're doing when you are present.
Very true.
Rather than when you're in the future or, the past. Also, you can start with 5 or 10 minutes a day, but it's important to practice regularly to feel the benefits.
Okay.
And in terms of judgments like, am I good at this or bad at this? That's exactly what we're trying to get away from, the judgment. So mindfulness is more about accepting your experience, whatever it is, with empathy and compassion.
I mean, I first started to explore mindfulness a couple of years ago, but I remember thinking sort of in the months leading up to that, exactly some of those thoughts, I don't have time for this. But I've actually found a really simple and natural way of being mindful by listening to the birds, which is something that, just came about quite naturally. But, now I wake up in the mornings and I first listen to the bird song, and I spend a few minutes just listening and being in that moment. And then naturally, I notice it throughout the day. So whether that's through a window or if I'm out on a walk, and it just automatically brings me back to that place of just being present and mindful. And it's now become something I just don't even think about, but it just gives me these really precious moments of peace throughout the day. So I wonder, for students who may feel like it's a task, do you have any suggestions for really simple, basic things like listening to the birds that students might be able to do to just gently bring their attention back to the present?
Yeah, that's lovely to hear about your experience, how you've incorporated mindfulness in such a lovely, delightful way. And I mean, mindfulness is about being rather than doing. So Mark Williams, in his book Mindfulness, a Practical Guide to Finding Peace in a Frantic World, talks about being and doing modes. And I think most students will spend much of their time in this doing mode. So striving, analyzing, revising, planning, avoiding feelings.
Yeah.
All of which will be depleting after a while. So mindfulness helps us transition into this being mode, which is more about sensing, accepting, approaching feelings, and making conscious choices that nourish us.
Yeah.
And we need to spend some time in being mode in order to recover from all the doing. Yeah. So there are many ways to experience being mode. And you can do it by focusing on your senses. When you have a cup of tea, for example, the smell, the taste, the warmth, or out on a morning walk, like you, the smell of the flowers, the feeling of movement, the sun and the breeze, the sound of the bird song.
Yeah.
There is a really lovely practice called the 3-minute breathing space, which is very quick and very grounding, and it gets you focusing on the sensation of the breath, which will calm your nervous system and decrease anxiety and stress, ground you in the present moment. So it's a great one to do before an exam or an interview or any time when you just really need to ground yourself.
Yeah.
So I've made a couple of 5-minute videos, one focusing on the 3-minute breathing space and one on having a mindful cup of tea. So check them out and see how you find them.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I think, like you said, it's really good to just give these things a go and just see how you feel. You know, even if you are a bit maybe skeptical or you're unsure, just give it a go. And you know, I mean, I instantly noticed I was just much calmer after practicing it, even for the very first time. So it really does have an amazing instant response. But I love that there are so many small things that you can do that just have that instant calming effect. And I'm definitely going to try and add in a couple more things. You know, even what you just said about making a cup of tea, it's just a perfect example of what I'm sure many of us do daily, just without thinking about it, you know, just on autopilot. I'm always drinking tea when I'm doing like multiple things. You know, now that I think about it, tea is just too good to not enjoy in the moment whilst I'm drinking it. So I'm definitely going to try and do that, probably straight after this. It also reminds me of a description that I read about mindfulness, which was being mindful allows you to find peace in a frantic world. And I think this word frantic is possibly a word that lots of our students will be able to resonate with, especially around certain periods at university when they're having to juggle a lot of different things. And I think probably this franticness is one of the reasons why we don't, you know, stop and enjoy the cup of tea or take those deep breaths. So how can mindfulness stop us from living life frantically? And could it even be actually important for us to be doing this?
Yeah, it's a great question. So mindfulness calms the nervous system. It slows us down and sends the message to our body, there is no threat here. Mm-hmm. So it activates the parasympathetic nervous system, which is responsible for the rest and digest functions. And it calms the sympathetic nervous system, which reacts to stress and threat.
Right.
Fight, flight, freeze responses, and reduces the production of cortisol and adrenaline. So I can give you an example from my life. I often get stressed, you know, when I'm on public transport and I'm kind of stuck and I know I'm going to be late and then there's nothing I can do.
Yeah.
And the more stressed I get, the more I can feel my cortisol rising. Mm. When I finally arrive where I need to be, I feel exhausted.
Yeah.
And depleted from this cortisol spike. But if I'm then able to do some mindfulness practice, this resets my nervous system, calms it, gives my body the message that everything's okay, and I'm then able to recover. So it is really interesting to think about, you know, what mindfulness does for us. And I mentioned John Kabat-Zinn's research earlier. So he's done research on working with people who are depressed and anxious, and also people with chronic physical health conditions,
right,
and pain management. So this is quite interesting, the pain management.
Yeah.
Because what he's found is that those people with chronic pain who practice mindfulness, they learn to accept the pain rather than to fight it. You know, and wish this pain was gone, or when is this pain going to go away? And also to notice other sensations which put the pain into context. And as a result, the participants reported experiencing less pain.
Wow.
And in addition, you know, one of the things I think has been really, really helpful for students is using mindfulness to help them sleep. Mm-hmm. So I think the most helpful meditation for this is the body scan meditation.
Okay.
And it's particularly good because it takes you out of the mind and the thinking and into the body and the sensing. which is what we need to fall asleep. So when we do the body scan meditation in our workshop with students, several of them usually fall asleep in the middle of the day.
Yeah, that would definitely be me as well. So it's just amazing. It clearly has not only benefits for our mental well-being and our state of mind, but also for our physical and physiological health. You know, you were talking about the stress response. So it really just sounds like living a more mindful life in whatever capacity you can manage, you know, really does improve well-being. And that's a really exciting prospect. So I guess as we start to wrap up, I want to ask, in line with our theme of having a kind mind, which we're really trying to focus on in this series, how does mindfulness help us to be kinder to ourselves?
Well, you could say that mindfulness is the practice of being kind to yourself.
Yeah.
Because when you allow yourself time to notice your experience, to accept yourself, to empathize with yourself and others, you are cultivating healthy self-esteem, resilience, and equanimity. You increase your perspective, your ability to respond rather than react, and to make conscious choices about what's good for you. And it's important that we're on our own side so that we feel supported, particularly when times are tough.
Yeah.
That we know what we need and are able to create it for ourselves.
Yeah.
Mindfulness is proactive self-care, a gift for you, from you. Try it and see what your experience is.
Yeah, I love that. A gift for you, from you. It's really amazing that we can all do this. We don't have to rely on anyone else to be mindful for us. It's something we can choose to do in order to take control of producing all these wonderful things for ourselves. And I think it's also important to note that, you know, mindfulness is something you can access anytime, anywhere. And that's also just such a huge benefit of it. So though mindfulness is clearly something that we can practice as individuals, I know you run a workshop for students, and lots of people who do practice mindfulness choose to attend groups regularly. So is this something that you would recommend for students too?
Definitely. I think it's easier to practice in a group than it is on your own, especially in the beginning.
Okay.
You know, a group will be more structured. There'll be people you can ask if things come up for you. And I would highly recommend the weekly mindfulness drop-ins at the chaplaincy, which are currently online. They also do longer 3 and 5 week courses run by my colleague Hogetsu there. So you can check out the website for details. Also, Mark Williams' book comes with MP3 downloads of meditations you could listen to, including the body scan.
Right.
And students also tend to like the apps, Headspace particularly, and Calm, which help you practice wherever and whenever it suits you. But I would suggest practicing, you know, making it a routine, practicing at the same time each day. Yeah,
I know that Headspace is one that I used for a while, and it was great, and I used it, you know, on my commute, and that was at the same time every day, and it just, you know, it forced me to sort of have that. I had that space, I had that time, and I just thought I'm going to use it to try and practice some mindfulness. And it's really good if you can get those noise cancelling earphones if you are planning on doing it on a tube. But that's great. So you mentioned loads of resources there, and actually that leads me just to remind everyone that along with each video, we obviously do include our recommended apps and podcasts and resources, which we have on our webpage along with these videos. So thank you for mentioning those, Layla. We'll make sure we get all that information on there. And you also mentioned those videos that you've recorded for us, which is amazing. So if you are sort of new to mindfulness, those would be really good to check out, I think, just as a sort of introduction. And yeah, it's really lovely to chat to you. So thank you.
You're welcome.
It's really inspiring, and I don't know if you can tell, but I'm quite excited by just the prospects of how much positivity mindfulness can bring, and it just really continues to help us face each day with a kind mind. So it's brilliant. So thank you for sharing all your knowledge with us. And for anyone watching, do send us an email, let us know what you thought, if you have any resources you want to share as well, and make sure you check out our other videos. And we'll see you next time, where we chat about developing resilience. So we'll see you then, and thank you, Layla, again.
Pleasure.